Welcome back to Portugal.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a while.
Yeah, like 7 years, I think.
And same venue as last time. So this is the first show of the tour. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that a lot of preparation yet goes into it. What can normally go wrong on the first show?
What can go wrong normally? Everybody oversleeps. No, it's if something was going to go wrong, usually it'd be in the shipping of the gear, or in the arrival of the bus, or in the merchandise showing up. You know, these are just logistical things that all have to be in one place at the beginning of the tour. They usually, they're fine. You know, they usually all go fine, but sometimes, you know, there can be a little issue there, but you figure it out.
And when you're preparing for the start of a tour, you know, when it comes to the set list, obviously you have a new record. So some of the songs of the new album are going to be featured. And you have like a lengthy career now with albums, so it must be a nightmare sometimes to pick and choose which songs. So considering the new record and how the older material can fit in, how do you normally prepare the set list?
Well, usually when I prepare a set list, and preparing a set list is one of my favorite parts because you get to feel through it. And I like to prepare it as if I'm sitting in the audience watching it. You know, I want to feel ebb and flow of energy. I don't want the show to be just like full energy the whole time. You know, we put some ballads in, and then this tour is a little different in that I don't talk a lot. You know, we just play. But usually I like to take. Of course, a handful of songs that people are expecting to hear, you know, Tender Surrender, For the Love of God, Bad Horsey. You know, in my catalog for my fans, those songs kind of, I suspect they'd love to hear. And then I like to go into the catalog and find some things that I've never played. You know, and we got a couple of those on this tour. And then usually you take 2 to 3 songs from the new record, but I'm doing a lot from the new record because so much, you'd be surprised, it's not so easy to pull songs from my catalog because my music is so eclectic sometimes. You know, it's very dense, it's very produced, some of it. So to reproduce that live with 4 guys, you know, it's like, but on this tour, we're doing a lot from In Violet. There's, we do, My Little Pretty, Zeus and Chains, Teeth of the Hydra, what are the others? We do like 5 or 6, maybe, you know, songs from the new record.
Normally that scares fans, you know, when a band. But I love when the artist, you know, when he has an album out. I mean, he made the record for a reason. And it's a shame if you don't give a chance for those songs. I mean, some might work, some might not, but you need to play them and see if they work or not.
Well, yes, and usually if it's a new song, fans are like, okay, here's a new song. You know, I like the old songs. But the response from In Violet was so powerful, so strong from the fans and the press and everything. It was so well received for an instrumental guitar player, 62 years old, you know, and I want to play more. You know, I want to play a lot of it. Plus, the songs are kind of built to play live. You know, they work live. So we do a lot of them.
And you brought the Hydra?
I brought the Hydra. That's right. I couldn't bring it on the first European tour because my shoulder, you know. But we did it on the American tour. I have it on a stand because...
it's a beauty.
It's a beauty, yeah. And when I shot the video, I had it on a strap on my hip. And that was fine, but it's heavy. And it's because it's a hip strap,
Yeah.
It doesn't move like a guitar, you know. So if you go like this, it takes you with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you just got to stand there. And when I recorded it, I had it on for the record, I had it on a stand, and it's, you know, it's easier.
Yeah.
You know, and I was asking fans during sound check on some of the shows.
Yeah.
I would play it on the stand, and then I'd stand up and play it. And I say, which do you like better? And they like the stand because they could see everything
Yeah.
more, you know?
Yeah.
Which is good for me because it's heavy.
But, you know, I admire you, not just the musicianship that you have, because you're always exploring the boundaries. You're not stuck to a genre. You know, even though there's, you know, probably metalheads will identify with you, but you're not stuck in that genre, and you keep exploring the boundaries of music. It's the same with instruments. You created the Hydra because you wanted to explore sounds.
Yeah.
Is that still a big part of who you are as an artist?
Yeah, because I think people enter the music business or the scene for different reasons. For some people, the goal is to get out there, be at the top of their genre, and make sure that what they're doing fits. And I think that's fine. You know, I've done that many times. But as a solo artist, I never felt like I could fit into anything.
Yeah.
Exclusively, you know.
Yeah.
And I never thought that my music, or what was interesting to me, was wildly accessible, you know, like pop music.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But one of the great things about the music business and music in general is its diversity.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much diversity in what's being offered by different artists, you know. So I had to give it some real attention in my mind and come to the fact and the conclusion that I'm happiest when I'm doing what feels natural to me.
Yeah.
And if you compromise that, you may accidentally, there's no accidents, but you may end up in a situation where you're selling a lot of records or you have a hit or whatever. But if you're not doing what creatively resonates with you, you're always depriving yourself of something more important than fame.
Yeah.
You know? I know that sounds cliche.
Yeah.
But I've discovered it's true because I've been all around. It's true for me. So I'm one of the fortunate ones, and I don't think that I'm alone in this. Many artists have no real choice but to follow their creative instincts. Yeah. And as a result, they find the right audience for them.
Yeah.
You know, so I've found such a wonderful kind of supportive audience for the kind of thing that I do, as off as it can be.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you get an idea for something like the Hydra or Knapsack or Little Pretty or any of those songs, for me it's kind of like I become hypnotized. It's like the idea comes and you go, huh? It's like you get out of the way. Yeah. And you let it unfold by just following the joy.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to, some people don't have to do this, but sometimes they do. You have to be careful of the little voices that come in and tell you, oh, how can you do that? You're not going to be, nobody's going to like that. No, you're not going to fit in. That's not going to sell. You're going to look weird. You know, you have to recognize when your fear is talking to you. Yeah. And know that it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And you will not be happy until you completely throw yourself into your creative instincts with no fucking excuses.
Yeah.
And then it's fun.
Yeah, but you know, but the thing I appreciate about a musician is his honesty with the music he's making.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everybody's like that, but I can see when something is fake.
Most people can.
Yeah.
Most people can see when somebody's really connected with what they're doing and when they're placating something else.
Yeah. And I think that shows, and you know, I sometimes listen to some music and I'm like, you know, the girl or the guy that's singing, he's just not feeling it. He's just, he has a great voice, okay, it's fine, he's singing whatever, but
yeah,
it's not coming from the heart.
Yeah, and that can change for an artist.
Yeah.
You know, because what happens is if you're doing that, chances are you won't be very well received unless you're stumbling into hit songs or something. But then if you stick with it, if you're a musician, you have no choice.
Yeah.
If you're a fantasizing rock star in your head, you can be very disappointed and feel very beaten up by the world, you know, because you're not achieving what you believe is your happy goals, you know. Your happy goal is always the expression of your truly unique creative instincts. That's your happy space.
Was ever a time in your career that you didn't feel happy with what you were doing?
Yeah, there was various times I would start doing things because of an agenda. I need a song like this because for radio, you know, so I'll say, okay, I have this whole record and maybe I got to do something that sounds like it'll get on the radio. You know, I used to do that. And I end up hating the song and never playing it, you know, and the fans don't like it very much, you know.
And you mentioned earlier that you're playing songs that you haven't played before. How do you look into those songs? Do you wonder, you know, why I haven't played this before? Does that happen when you're playing like a new song that you haven't played before? And you wonder like, why did I have not played this? This sounds so good.
Yeah. There's certain kinds of songs that I record, like trio songs, bass, drums, and guitar, like the whole Alien Love Secrets record, or songs like Frank, or Boston Rain Melody, or Die to Live. You know, these are kinds of songs that I just love playing so much because it's all guitar.
Yeah.
And the guitar is a part. It's like the poetry, you know, and there's nothing surrounding it. So anything you do is it's handed to you. And I love that stuff, but usually when I'm putting a set list together, I want it to have an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
You know, so for instance, there's a lot of ballad songs on the guitar that I do that I love. They're usually the 7th song, and you can only play so many of them, or else, you know, the whole show is like ballads.
Yeah.
But when placed in the right spot of the show, so when I put together a show and I'm choosing the ballady type songs, I know I have to play For the Love of God.
Yeah.
I know I have to play Tender Surrender. And then after that, I have maybe space, maybe for one more.
Yeah.
You know? And usually that's when I go back into the catalog, and out of 5 or 10 that would be perfect, I can only pick one.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of music, you were sitting on an album by Gash for 30 years.
Yeah.
And listening to that, you know, I was like, why 30 years? You know, this sounds so good. And you know, I read that you want to make a record for when you're riding your motorbike, something that you could enjoy. And I'm like, I like to listen to music when I'm driving my car, and sometimes just, you know, go.
Yeah.
I love to listen to records and, you know, just go on the road.
Yeah.
But why did you have to wait 30 years to release an album that it's actually very, very good.
Thank you.
It's a kind of record that I listen on the car driving. I love it.
Yeah, and it's so short, you can listen to it over and over.
Yeah.
Every song is straight ahead and melodic. There's it's uplifting.
Yeah.
As the story goes, back when I was starting to prepare for Sex and Religion, I was a big motorcycle Harley Davidson enthusiast. I had 7 Harleys, and that was my guilty pleasure. I didn't have any. I never spent money on drugs or fancy cars. My favorite car is Uber. I don't have any real. I'm not like into antique vintage guitars. I don't care about any of that stuff, but I like Harleys, and I like studio gear. So that's how I. But with the Harleys, it's a wonderful community of people. And riding a motorcycle is just a different kind of experience. If you ever talk to a motorcycle enthusiast, they talk about that feeling of freedom and being in the wind. And I just loved it, and with my friends, we're going on some kind of an adventure. Yeah. And I got these giant Harleys, it's got speakers and we're listening to music. And I was just thinking, it's not the music that I want. I want biker fun, uplift. I want music that's going to make me feel like the way I feel when I'm on the motorcycle, like a badass, and everybody can be a badass in their own mind, especially if they're listening to this record. Sometimes we do things impulsively, and sometimes, and I'm guilty of that.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, but there's a certain energy in your impulsivity that has a very. It's not like an excited, overzealous kind of I got to do this because then it's then I'll be famous or whatever it is. It's more like of a creative, a recognition of a creative idea that's built for you. Yeah. And it comes from in. And I just thought, I'm going in the studio right now and I'm going to record a record so we have music to listen to on our motorcycles. Give me a week. That was basically it. It was because it was just like, da da da, dung, go, and I just went in the studio and I just ripped it out. And I knew, okay, so a great way to create an atmosphere for an entire record is to go there in your head first. Go there in your mind and your imagination. So with the Gash record, I loved 70s rock because that's what I grew up on, I wanted it to be 70s, 80s because I was a musician in the 80s. I wanted it to be straight ahead, no crazy guitar. I don't think I used my whammy bar on the whole record, I just wanted it to be totally straight ahead, very melodic, just good sounding, well-structured rock songs that make you feel good when you listen to them or make you feel like a badass, and I did it. And then I needed somebody to sing it. And I tried singing it, and that was a disaster, because I don't have a rock voice like that. And my dearest friend, Johnny Gash Sombrato, we were riding for years, and close friends, and I didn't know he could sing. He didn't really know he could sing. He wasn't a professional singer. He could sing like Frank Sinatra. He had like this crooner voice, and it was amazing. But I would hear him. He was wild. This guy was so wild. He was so wonderful, and he grew up very kind of a tough New York, East Coast Italian biker, right? And when he was 21, he got into this. He climbed these electrical poles, towers. Yeah. To see where he was because he was riding his dirt bike and he got lost. And the electricity arced and it went through his body. It went in here and came out his feet and it cooked him. And he fell 30 feet onto a barbed wire fence and he caught fire. And he was burned, third-degree burns over 60% of his body. It was I think hell would be polite, you know? And he survived miraculously, but he's covered in scars. You know, his body is all gashed up, and that's how he got the name Gash. And it's interesting because, like, all this is all burnt, but his face is perfect. And he moved out to California, and we started writing. And it's so difficult to explain what Johnny was like. He was the quintessential lead singer, and I've worked with a lot of them. Yeah. And I know the rock star DNA quality, you know, and he had it in abundance. First of all, I would hear him kind of like scream or throw out a Zeppelin line, and I thought, there's something in there. So I pulled him into the studio, and I just couldn't believe what came out of his mouth. The sound, the confidence, the swagger, the charisma, the pitch, you know, and the control, because he goes into that grungy voice naturally. I've worked with so many singers that use that as a backup. You know, and it's like, it's not the range for it, it's not the lyrics for it, you know. But Gash, man, he just had that instinct. So, and he did it so quick. You know, I had all the lyrics, I had all the melodies and everything, and I gave him a tape, and I say, learn this. He'd have to suffer through hearing me sing it. or we'd be in the studio, and I'd just say, sing this, you know, and he just picked it up right away. But he was such an interesting guy. He was so funny. He was so unpredictable and crazy, insane. And it pissed you off sometime because you just never knew what he was going to do. You just never knew. I mean, if you look at the back of the album cover, he's riding his motorcycle. He's sitting on the back seat. He's turned completely around, and he's going like this. So the record, I had it recorded, and I only had 8 songs, and one of them I had written with Nikki Sixx, and it was called New Generation. And I was planning on, as I had mentioned, constructing Sex and Religion. So I was obligated to do that because I had contracts and stuff. And then I was planning on getting back and finishing the Gash music, and there was things I wanted to tweak. You know, it was basically like demos. And there was things I wanted to tweak in the guitar and the voice, add a couple more songs. And Gash was killed in a bike accident, and that was it. And I was so disheartened. I just took the whole project and I just threw it on the shelf, and I just left it because there was nothing that could be done. I couldn't tour it. I couldn't promote it, you know, because, and I also didn't feel like it was the right time to release a record like that. I made that record for me and my friends to ride our motorcycles, and oddly enough, and this is the truth, I wasn't planning on releasing it then, because that was 1991, and if you played rock music like that, you were just the devil. You know, that music, the grunge came in and just tore the head off of all of that. And this record was precious to me. It was precious because it was created with no, it was just created with good intentions. You know, it was for us. I didn't care what the rest of the world thought. You know, I didn't want to throw it to the wolves, because when you make a record back in those days, it's a whole process. There's usually a whole committee involved. If I wanted to record something with Dave Roth or Whitesnake or Alcatraz, there's tons of people involved. There's the other band musicians. There's the producer, the engineer, the A&R guy from the label.
Probably attorneys as well.
There's attorneys as well, you know, who's got the publishing, you know, and there's so many, there's a whole committee, a huge committee, the record company, what are the fans going to like, you know? Well, I don't think we should. So, and that's fine, because, and I'm good at contributing to that. I have for many years, you know, but not this record. It was a committee of one. And I went into the studio and I just blew it out. And I answered to nobody, not even myself, meaning, who's going to like this? You know, who am I doing this for? Nothing like that. So it was completely authentic, and it felt a little precious, you know. And I didn't want to just throw it out there till they would have been destroyed, because, you know. So, and plus he was gone. Yeah. So I put it on the shelf, and probably 10 years later I started listening to it, and it brought me right back to those amazing adventures, because we were constantly going on bike trips with our girls and friends, and it was just the best. And I kept thinking to myself, one of these days you should release this, but you got to go in there and you got to fix this and you got to fix that and maybe add this, and you got to figure out a way to at least maybe put an instrumental song on it, you know. So that kept me from actually doing it, because it's like, well, I'll do that after this, you know, because I have to do this, you know. So then it's like one thing after another. So then finally last year, I was listening to the record again, and I said, okay, look, Vai, you're 62, you're not going to go in there and fix this or anything. Just release it exactly the way it is. Don't touch it. And I didn't. And I went into the basement and I got the tapes that was sitting on the shelf for 30 years. And I had to bake them. Yeah. You know, baking them is a process of, because if you store analog tapes, they start to, particles start to separate from the adhesive. And there's a process where you put them in a convection oven for, I think it's 3 hours at 130 degrees, or 5 hours, you know. And it bakes the particles back into the backing of the tape. And then if you can play the tape, otherwise it just shreds, you know. So I got it to that point, and then I just sent the tapes to Mike Frazier, who is an absolutely amazing mixer. I didn't even mix. It's the first record of mine I didn't mix, you know. And I got it back, and I said, well, maybe a couple of fans will like it, you know, to see what it was going on. And I am just stunned at the response on this record. Every person, journalists, fans that have listened to it, start gushing. It's fantastic.
No, I think, you know, for me, I think it's a great record. And you know, knowing the story, it just feels like, you know, 30 years, you know, but you were right. Probably if we had released like in the 90s, probably no one would remember, and, you know, probably would be just another record. But now it's a bit more special. Yeah,
I think it's the right time. Yeah. Because remember, I was coming off of Passion and Warfare. Yeah. So Passion and Warfare introduced me as this kind of a eclectic musical kind of a guy. Yeah. And it didn't feel right to follow it up with Vai Gash, which is, you know. But I will say one thing about that record now. I've had so much good fortune of being able to play in huge bands, tour the world, selling out arenas and sometimes stadiums, and I know what it's like to be on that stage, and I know what it's like for a lead singer to take command of the audience and be engaging and confident and powerful. And every time I listen to the Vai Gash record, because I knew Johnny so well, I see him in that position, and he would have been just fantastic. Mm. I know that. I can go on. I feel confident in saying, I know that.
Do you think he would jump to the crowd?
That would be my only concern, that he would do something insane. You know?
Because you were telling me the story, and I was thinking, like, if he was probably in front of a crowd, I'm sure somewhere he would jump to the middle.
Much worse than that. I mean, he would ride a Harley like this, on a wheelie. You know, he would have rode it onto the stage like that. I'm telling you, he was crazy. He would have been your favorite rock star.
And you know, you spoke of Harleys. I know Neil Peart of Rush.
Who?
Neil Peart from Rush.
Yeah.
I think he did like, you know, while the guys were on the bus, he did the thing on the bike.
Yeah.
Would you ever do anything crazy like that? You know, a tour where you just ride a motorbike from town to town?
No. I thought about doing that at one point. Well, I would love to do something like that, but there's a lot of logistics involved, and it's I don't want to take those kinds of risks.
Yeah.
When I'm on tour, you have this radar, you know, and things are just a little different. You're careful, you know. I'm constantly aware of where my hands are, you know. I don't touch anything, you know. I don't pick things up. I don't do anything.
Yeah.
Not now.
Yeah, and you know, 2 more questions before I let you go, if you don't mind. Devin Townsend played here in Lisbon last week.
Oh yeah.
And you know, you worked with him on Sex and Religion. How was that period of, you know, coming from Passion and Warfare and going into an album with a singer? How was that experience? And someone like Devin, because the guy's a freaking genius. He's
a freaking genius. Well, I didn't realize that at the time, because I wasn't looking for a genius. I was looking for somebody that could sing really well. And he was so young. He was a teenager, you know. And I knew I wanted to make a really heavy rock record that had a musical edge to it. And I knew I wanted a really great singer. And I had heard Devin, and I was just, wow, you know, he was amazing. And then I met him and all, and I said, he's kind of crazy, you know, in a fun way. Yeah. Devin is totally with it, you know, but back then he was very overzealous. But I got such a kick out of it because you just never knew what Devin was going to do. He was a constant source of entertainment, and it was fun to record him because he could sing so well. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, this kid could do all this stuff. And he was a good guitar player. And he was very respectful. You know, he might tell you things now that he did back then, and he did a lot more. You should have seen the one time him and Gash got together. I can't even tell you that story, what happened. But Devin was wild, and I got a kick out of that. You know, I'm mischievous, but not like that. But he was also kind of unhappy because he was like a very colorful bird in a small cage. Yeah. Because he had to do everything I wanted. I didn't want a band, you know. I knew what I wanted, and I wanted everybody to do exactly what I wanted them to do. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, nobody wrote Beethoven's notes but him, you know. And of course, I want everybody to contribute comfortably, you know, their expertise, you know. But at that time and now, my goal has always been to build a catalog of music that's virtually undiluted by anybody else's contribution. Because I have a particular recipe, you know, and if you have a recipe, you don't want the other cooks in the kitchen, but I need everybody's ingredients, and I need their best ingredients. So Devin was an incredible ingredient, but like I say, he was unhappy because he's not the kind of artist that should be told what to do, and I'm not the kind of artist that I am capable of being in a band
Yeah.
where everybody's contribution is unequivocally accepted.
Yeah.
But not my band, you know? And frankly, I didn't know how brilliant he was, you know, because he was doing my stuff.
Yeah.
But once he started doing his solo music, I was like, holy shit, oh my God. It was the most powerful. It was like, for me, as just a guy that likes to listen to music, it was like this form of intense freedom. His ear, there's a beauty, for me, there's a deep, profound beauty in Devin's insanity.
Yeah.
You know, in his even in his most destructive kind of arsenal of sound, you know, his intensity of sound, the heaviness of it, there's a profound beauty I don't hear in a lot of other music, music like that.
Yeah.
And he's prolific, man. Like, we talk and he's like, yeah, you know, we're like, let's do something, you know, I got these songs, and he'll send me like 20 songs, and I'm like, it's going to take me a week to work on this one, you know. But he's just he's hell on wheels, man. Yeah. And he continues to do it.
Yeah, I love the show, and that he played. It was, you know, such a magnificent experience to see him do what he loves.
Yeah.
You know, all the craziness, the sense of humor that he has. You know, it was
it's a crazy, unique sense of humor.
Hell-bent from start to finish.
You're talking about the show last week?
Yeah, the show last week. You know, from start to finish. You know, great experience. And, you know, to wrap it up, this record, it's 3 years short of 40 years. It was 1986.
Wow. You know, it's funny, when I was younger and I'd see people saying that record is now 50 years old or 40 years old, I go, why aren't they dead?
But this David Lee Roth record, Eat 'Em and Smile, is going to be like 3 years short of 40 years.
Wow.
You know, what is the thing that comes to mind when you think of these records?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the band, Billy, Greg, Brett, and how much fun we had, you know, being on a tour. What I think right away is what it was like to be on an arena tour, you know, in a rock band like that in the 80s. You know, that was just remarkable. The experience of being on that stage, it was easy. It was easy. And there was no, it was a rock star life.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I never did drugs really, you know, I never drank really, you know, I mean, back then, you know, but, and I was never really wildly promiscuous, you know, but I was a very colorful fly on the wall, and I saw things that you wouldn't, you think you could imagine. And you can't imagine what you can't imagine. And it was so great. It was just so great to be a part of that. And the record, sometimes you do things and then they blossom.
Yeah.
And then you look back and you go, yeah, but it just seems so easy. You know, like all the songs on that record were fun to write and record and to blast out. It was just an amazing experience. And you're asking me about it now 38 years later or whatever. It's an honor. It's a privilege to have something like that.
Yeah. You know, it's an amazing record. And, you know, you're talking about, I think, rock and roll, there's wild stories of rock and roll. Yeah, and I didn't live with those rock bands. I can only read books. And sometimes I prefer to imagine, you know, some of them might be true. Others probably just a bit exaggerated. But I prefer the imagination. Just
Why not?
yeah,
You know, it's fun.
yeah. Steve,
It was good, clean fun.
Yeah, Steve, thank you very much for your time. You know, it
Thank you.
was a pleasure to talk
All
to
right.
you.